Boa noite, bem-vindos à segunda sessão do Projecto MUSIVUS. Estamos no nosso quarto ciclo. Esta noite temos connosco a compositora Patrícia Sucena de Almeida e o pianista Ian Pace. O Ian Pace é um pianista bastante conhecido, já teve mais de 300 estreias de obras, uma boa parte delas dedicadas a ele, como é o caso da obra que vamos ouvir hoje. A Patrícia, o Ian, portanto, é o diretor do Departamento de Música na City University of London, right, Ian? Yes. E a Patrícia conheceu o Ian, portanto, e este projeto conjunto começou quando a Patrícia foi estudar para esta universidade e depois prosseguiu alguns estudos também em Inglaterra. A sessão de hoje, excepcionalmente por causa do Ian, será maioritariamente falada em inglês. Caso haja alguma necessidade assim, muito importante de tradução, nós poderemos tentar ajustar alguma coisa, mas só para fazer essa salvaguarda. Passo-lhes a palavra.
Olá, boa noite a todos. Estou aqui atrás de uma estante, não sei, João, se calhar depois podemos colocar novamente. Desde já agradeço, estou aqui a ver caras conhecidas, já não vi há muito tempo, que é fantástico, mesmo aqui. Não sou só eu a única compositora aqui, há o Bruno, está mesmo ali à minha frente. Bruno, já há muito tempo não te via. E outras pessoas importantes também aqui para mim, na minha vida. Eu para já queria agradecer, e já é praxe este assunto, mas acho que se deve agradecer a quem nos convida, não é, para situações destas que são raríssimas e que implicam, parece que não, mas algum trabalho não só destas duas pessoas que estão aqui, mas as pessoas que estiveram hoje todo o dia aqui connosco a resolver problemas para que isto funcione a esta hora. E para além disso, o João já fez um pequeno apanhado sobre o Ian e eu. De qualquer forma, eu estou bastante ligada à Inglaterra nesse sentido, no sentido de estudos que prossegui após a Universidade de Aveiro. E na realidade, onde o Ian está a ensinar agora foi onde eu estudei ainda há algum tempo. Depois saltei para outros sítios, teve que ser, acho que isto não é novidade para ninguém, não é? Temos que procurar outras situações que nos sirvam melhor. E finalmente sentei-me ao lado de um senhor chamado Michael Finney, que me abriu completamente os horizontes. Demorou a procurar, mas abriu-me bastante os horizontes e foi aí que eu fiquei. Não só em termos de composição, mas também em termos de ser humano e ser humano que pesquisa sempre alguma coisa. Eu vou introduzir textos em inglês porque acho que são importantes também para o Ian. Estou aqui a falar chinês para ele neste momento. E algumas palavras em francês porque são elas que me dizem o que eu pretendo em determinadas situações e não português nem outra língua qualquer. E por isso vou fazê-lo. Custa-me um bocadinho, posso cometer erros de entoação, etc., mas não me importo. Eu para já há algum tempo, não foi há muito tempo, há algum tempo pediram-me para escrever algumas linhas sobre a minha colaboração com o Ian e precisamente da universidade onde ele trabalha. E então eu dediquei um bocadinho desse meu tempo a escrever. Claro que depois eles só leem inglês, não é? Teve que ser em inglês. Posso não me exprimir tão bem, mas eu vou ler. The pieces I wrote for piano, since the first one were for Ian. And I was thinking about his multifunctional qualities, dealing not only the traditional playing of the instrument, but also using other kind of techniques and demanding other kind of actions, like specific movements of the body. It is to be mentioned that other mediums are used in some of the pieces, like film. These collaborations are being constant, I mean with other artists. all media used intertwine in such a way that they need to be there at the same time and place. Ian is not just a performer but a thinker. He not only plays the keys of the piano, but behind it there is a huge research and criticism about music and other areas, which can develop other kind of qualities which sometimes are not visible. He is a worried human being, questioning everything, and he is not happy with the immediate thoughts. His tendency is to perform works that actually are not played as often as they deserve to be, and also those which have a specific, different personal discourse. He likes to be challenged in various ways. Let's just look to his concerts. I called him the piano marathonist. Ian, do you have any comment about these words, or?
I'm just very flattered by what you say.
It's not new, actually. Everyone knows. I just wrote them, so.
It's certainly true that I like music that's both technically and sort of intellectually challenging, and perhaps as much as any solo instrument, the piano comes with such a tradition, such a lot of baggage, so many associations which still appear even if one's not thinking when playing contemporary repertoire. And for a lot of my career, I feel I've been actually trying to not just reinvent the instrument, but reinvent the whole approach to interpretation. Not out of a negation of tradition necessarily, but an askew perspective, a critical relationship to that tradition and all that, well, in particular, all that is entailed in the idea of, say, losing oneself in music, the idea of music as some spell, something to bewitch, something for which people will then turn their critical faculties off. That's the opposite in many ways of what I want. I want music to sharpen the mind, to stimulate the mind, not lull it into submission. And whether it's old or new piano music, I'm always looking for, or when I'm playing with other performers as well, I'm always looking for things for ways to make that manifest. I'm always deeply interested in the sorts that the conductor Nicholas Arnoncourt had to say about how he felt the rot had been setting in since about the 1790s with the founding of the Paris Conservatoire and the move away from learning music as part of a wider education towards a much more streamlined type of training where people are taught simply to learn finely tuned technical skills, which are of course extremely important, in the name of just producing an overwhelming emotional experience. Those aren't things I reject, but those exclusively form a too narrow view of what the whole process of music making is about, in my view.
Okay, I think you say more than me about you, so it's well, I decided to talk a bit about the piano works I wrote, and they were actually, Ian played all of them, and actually it's really difficult to find players who can do it in every way. I mean, it's not only playing the piano, as I said, but using other kind of movements or actions. Well, I'll start with a piece from 2009, in Oculto. It was played in Aveiro in 2009, and then in Leuven in the same year, and then at City University too. The piece was inspired not only by Victor Hugo's book Notre Dame de Paris, but also by the films created and based on this story. The following lines from the book describe precisely the inspirational source, and they couldn't be left apart from this comment, being included at the introduction of the piece. Et il est sûr qu'il y avait une sorte d'harmonie mystérieuse et préexistante entre cette créature et cet édifice. Lorsque tout petit encore, il se traînait tortueusement et par soubresauts sous les ténèbres de ses voûtes. Il semblait avec sa face humaine et sa membrure bestiale, le reptile naturel de cette dalle humide et sombre sur laquelle l'ombre des chapiteaux romans projetait tant de formes bizarres. Il y avait entre la vieille église et lui une sympathie instinctive si profonde, tant d'affinité magnétique, tant d'affinité matérielle, qu'il adhérait en quelque sorte comme la tortue à son écueil. La rugueuse cathédrale était sa carapace. Parece que não, mas as próprias palavras noutra língua são bastante importantes para qualquer tipo de investigação que depois poderá surgir em termos de título, de título da obra, de título de qualquer situação, e comigo isso é muito importante em termos de trabalho sempre que faço. Well, I'll ask Ian about Enquanto and this performance, especially at City University.
The recording you have is of the one at City University, is that correct?
Well, maybe I'll use now. I'll use now a bit of the sound.
Sure.
And then we can talk a bit.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Just a little remark. These pieces also have other kind of mediums. In this case, I have always performance notes before the piece, and in here, well, we can see some of those details which include the stage plan. And all the information I have for the pianist, dressed in black. The piano is placed here, and then we have other kind of things in the scenery. So the important thing here is to have a kind of shadow to remember us about this monster who is always appearing and disappearing. It's not easy to have these pieces performed everywhere. So each time we go to somewhere, we need to look at the places and see the possibilities we have. But Ian, can you just add something to? this work?
Sure. I think it's true of, well, certainly of that piano piece and the one I'm going to play later in particular, that they very much formed of material in a state of becoming, and these very starkly contrasted types of material you use, whether it's those sort of knell of those opening chords, or that sort of filigree-like fragment, which gradually gets slightly more elaborated, and similarly in Desperatio with various clearly set out material. I mean, I know that happens to some extent in several of your pieces, but most pronouncedly in that it's almost like. I mean, obviously in that piece you have the dancers and you have the shadows going with them, but it's like a shadow of, it's like a set of different types of shadows of things that are never quite there, are always in the state of being alluded to rather than actually sort of presented outright, though they sort of, through the extension of the materials that you have, I would say that they sort of come into they approach a state of being in general without ever sort of quite reaching there, and you always tend to pull back there, and that's one of the things that gives the music one of some of its very dark qualities. But with all these flickering of lights, if I'm to use a visual metaphor, which I'm sometimes a bit resistant to with music.
Well, it's good to hear someone talk about what you do sometimes, because maybe it's a different perspective in some ways. Well, the second piece is Reditus ad vitam from 2012, and it was also played in Coimbra, in Florence, and in Lisbon. This piece is in a way very demanding, because each time I did it, I need to look at the space and the possibilities, and then work on it. And we had two different ways of working and doing it. The first one was the premiere of the piece, and we did actually with two dancers, and we work on a choreography. But then the piece went away from Portugal, and again we had really difficulties to have all of this, and then I was thinking to do something else, and I used the video from this concert and worked on it with a colleague of mine, and we did this kind of work with film. I have some parts of it only to show you. Well, also for this piece, I had a big plan, as always we have. But actually, we need to look at the space and see how we can do it, and if we have means to do it. I'm going just to read a small bit about it. The constant rebirth and renewal after unexpected moments, difficulties, and the analogy of these cyclical moments with the metaphoric path of beings until their interaction on a common flight and combined with another of its kind contributed as source of inspiration impulse. The symbolism of the butterfly existential association, man, butterfly, and flight influence the constituent elements of the piece. Formal structure, the rhythmic material, melodic and harmonic material, the tempo, and the texture. Still to mention that the first version of the piece, como eu acabei de dizer, as I said, is for piano and actor and 2 dancers. And the second version includes piano and film, as a result of a collaborative work dealing technical and aesthetical issues with another artist. I will mention him, Daniel Antero, who is collaborating with me during all these years. Maybe I'll... The recording is not really the best, but I hope to... the sound, please. Okay. So you can hear the noises, but this is part of the office. So it was from here that we took the film part. Well, Ian,
yes,
your comment, please.
Yes, and the last time I played that was 3 years ago, as you know, here in Lisbon, different venue in Lisbon. That's, of your 5 piano pieces, the one where I hear the influence of your teacher, Michael Finnessy, most strongly, particularly in the whole formation of the gestures, and with this sort of very, very extravagant sense. I mean, just the size, the contours, the angularity of them, and well, I say the expansiveness. Once again, I'm trying to get away from visual metaphors because I think they're used far too often for music, but also in the particular form that the sort of musical montage makes, and that's another visual metaphor, but it's one that exists in time rather than space. That music, more than the others, opens up a language using lots of arabesques, which I know this continues more in the most recent piano piece. A new sort of opulence, a new, yes, as I say, extravagance in these quite expansive fragments, but which also have a bit of the quality of the music of Conlan Nankar, I think, because they're so compressed and such a sort of explosion of activity at times, which is just as quickly pulled back from there. It's into what there's perhaps less of in that, compared certainly to an occulto and to this piece. In occulto, you get in these. The music gets literally sort of stuck in these repeated chords, very rapid repeated chords, very hard to play as well. Just so you have sort of hints of that with the repeated notes in here, there. It's as if that one was very sort of focused inwards, whereas this, as Redditor, is absolutely sort of a more extroverted piece, a more outward-looking piece, I would say, even though it has still that sort of building out of small fragments in the same way. And
well, this is a kind of new for me, so it seems that I'm a bit
It's saying how it
we
appears
never
to me
talked
is.
about this before, so this is the premiere of it. Well, the next piece is Vacuum Corporis, and it was played in Transit Festival, again in Belgium, Leuven. We have two pianos and film. With a musical mixed discourse intersect with the projected film. Piano 1 has the main material, walking against the tide, and Piano 2 is trying to seize the fluidity and freedom with a mechanic material in a continuous motion, joining sometimes Piano 1. The basic idea lies in two main thoughts that work as sources of the inspiration impulse. Firstly, the mechanical behavior of human-shaped beings accepting everything without a critical thought. Secondly, and resulting from the previous attitude, the existence of human beings without instinct or personality, always choosing a spectator's role during their existence. Apart from these inspirational thoughts, it must be mentioned not only the photos taken by myself and well-known photographers like Lisette Model, Eric Callahan, among others. Capturing streets ambience, people walking with a posture, gesture, and purpose, mixing different situations, movements, gestures, feelings, but also the research done by the film's author, Daniel Antero, influenced by Akira Kurosawa, by the No Theatre, and by cyberpunk. All these sources work also as intervenient elements mixed with the musical discourse, ending up in a cohesive and interactive speech, which places this creation in the so-called transversal multi-art. I'll show you a few parts of the film. I think you have something to say, dealing you and Ben when playing this.
Absolutely.
From your experience, I mean.
Second pianist playing this is a young pianist called Ben Smith, who was once a student at City University where I teach. Absolutely brilliant player. Plays remarkable performances of works of Brian Ferneyhough and others, and someone is fantastic to work with. What I'd say, I mean, there's sort of questions I'd like to put to you about the whole relationship between the visual and oral sides of what you do, but maybe those are for a bit later. But what I notice in that piece especially, to some extent in all of your pieces, but certainly in that, is a reason why it's important to hear this music live, I think. There is a whole balletic quality to actually playing it, and I feel it is a particular type of physical experience, and the way I'm actually literally dancing on the keys in that sense, keeping certain sort of steps, physical steps through the motions used to make the sounds, which is always a subject of great fascination to me. That there's one view of playing the piano which would say that the physical motions are about nothing more than what will produce the desired sounds as efficiently as possible. And to some extent I wouldn't disagree with that. But I am also interested in what it actually looks like. What it looks like to see the motion of the hands, to see the motion of the wrists and the arms as well, and how that can actually be engineered into the piece to, as I say, produce a particular sort of physical spectacle. And the two piano parts are very contrasting in that piece. I mean, it's fair to say the second part is quite a bit simpler to play and a lot more in terms of very regular steps, whereas the first piano is playing a much more sort of free fantasia-like writing around a lot of that, though they come together in various places. And I suppose I'm interested to ask you, because you knew both of us, what you were thinking of in terms of the theatre of the piece, in terms of what the actual musicians do in that respect when you were writing it.
First I need to say that when I maybe I'll mention that that picture is from the concert place where they played this piece, and where you see written screen was the place where we projected the film. And actually, when I saw that place, I thought that we didn't need any screen, because the wall was so near to the texture of the film that I thought, well, it's enough. I don't need any screen. And the result was what I wanted. And secondly, I need to mention that when I saw the sound result of the piece, I thought it was only Ian playing. So they, or not Ben playing because he had another kind of material, but they were so together, and that I thought it was only him. And this was what I wanted, actually. And it was too much for Ian to play, I think, only with the four hands. But at the same time, I needed another piano because of register issues and other kind of texture results. So that's why I needed two pianos. And side by side, because I wanted only to have, as a result, one sound and one pianist. Ian mentioned also this body movement and the need of their use, and it's essential. If we stay like me, like I am really nervous now, we don't play anything, and we need our body and everything. Oh, okay, thank you. I'm much better to think, because I really need to relax a bit. So it's really important to use our body and our arms and hands. And if you write something thinking about that, the result is really different, and especially with this final piece. And I was really more specific about it. The way of playing, it's really important, the visual side. I'm only showing parts of the work. And I need to say that this is usually what happens. Sometimes we only have the possibility to hear the sound, and because we don't have any conditions to do more during festivals and other kind of events. So sometimes I have my material all like that. Maybe one day we'll have everything together. We never know. It is okay, or?
Of course, yeah.
Well, I'll end up with the piece Ian will play tonight, and it's called Desperatio. And it is the 5th piece for piano, developed from a miniature with the same title and written for the mentioned instrument and film. It was written for Ian Pace, not only as a pianist who uses his fingers on the keyboard, but as a complete performer, changing his way of playing as the score asks. Again, as in other pieces, there is a collaboration between myself and the film artist Daniel Antero, being the two mediums used intertwined in such a way that they need to be there at the same time and place. The text by André Breton, Je connais le désespoir dans ses grandes lignes, was the main inspirational source, but also other individualities as, and this for the film part, Alfred Hitchcock, Fritz Lang, and from painting, Salvador Dali and Man Ray in photography. The main gesture used for the film and music is the nervous flickering of a closed human eye, which symbolizes the despair of a being. At a certain point it opens, but we never know when, being the eye at a certain point transformed into a pearl. Coming metaphorically from André Breton text, un collier de perles pour lequel on ne saurait trouver de fermoir et dont l'existence ne tient pas même à un fil. Voilà le désespoir. Je connais le désespoir dans ses grandes lignes, une forme très petite, délimitée par un bijou de cheveux. C'est le désespoir, un collier de perles pour lequel on ne saurait trouver de fermoir et dont l'existence ne tient pas même à un fil. Voilà le désespoir. Le reste, nous n'en parlons pas. Nous n'avons pas fini de désespérer si nous commençons. Dans ces grandes lignes, le désespoir n'a pas d'importance. C'est une corvée d'arbres qui va encore faire une forêt. C'est une corvée d'étoiles qui va encore faire un jour de moins. C'est une corvée de jours de moins qui va encore faire ma vie. André Breton. Eu, para além destas palavras, pedi ao Daniel também um pouco sobre o processo de trabalho, já que ele também nunca fala. Nós trabalhamos bastante online, mas a comunicação é excelente porque o resultado é isto, não é? Desespero foi um processo de reflexão e síntese sobre... aliás, Desperatio foi um processo de reflexão e síntese sobre o desespero, concebido sobre a ideia primordial da minha pessoa, de apresentar a dor e o desespero do homem através do olho e da sua íris. A minha primeira abordagem ao desafio foi a de interpretar um pesadelo, representando com figuras monstruosas, pouco definidas corporalmente, mas com um enleio e movimento algo reptiliano e obscuro. Na colaboração que tenho com a Patrícia, que se estende lá já por vários filmes, existe um processo de descoberta, de desenvolvimento e de crença sobre um conceito e um princípio de trabalho iniciado por ela. Num período inicial, são várias as vezes que não tenho acesso à obra musical, o que permite um distanciamento rítmico e imaginético, dando espaço a que a criatividade e a estética assentem mais no que interpreto das suas intenções, do que no registro musical. Algo que dá espaço a felizes coincidências e a um resultado intermédio orgânico e cru. Mas existe um tronco comum recorrente na nossa partilha e descoberta. Referências como Hitchcock, Kurosawa, Dali e Fritz Lang são regularmente um ponto de partida. A imagética, monocromática, a simplicidade sensorial e a forma do quadro são a espinha dorsal da parte visual dos projetos, o que levou a que se desconstruísse a primeira versão do projeto de Esperácio. O exagero interno visual, representado pelo uso de criaturas que procurava a interpretação global de um pesadelo, foi sintetizado e de forma metafórica e literal, cristalizado numa pérola que engloba todos os desesperos que procuramos expelir. Chegada a esta fase, o processo desenvolve-se para o sincronismo e assincronismo com a música final, com vista a jogar com o jogo de complementos da ação-reação ou pergunta-resposta, guiado meticulosamente pelo discurso musical. A definição e interpretação final acontece no concerto, que é sempre novidade para mim, e expande a relação áudio-vídeo a um novo nível. A interpretação musical e física do pianista Ian Pace é sintomática na obra e um novo patamar do desespero. Sorry, it must be in Portuguese. But it's a kind of conclusion about all we said. And it's amazing because he wrote this and sent me, and I said, okay, great conclusion. It's done. Well, I'm not sure if you have some comments already.
Well, I mean, this piece more... All of your piano pieces are very, very physically demanding to play, but this one seems to work a sort of defamiliarized approach to the instrument in more explicitly into it. I mean, particularly at the from the very beginning, you have these different types of physical action, which are not so much about the actual sound produced, but actually how the hand makes quite exaggerated gestures coming off notes, and that's contrasted with the same material played with very economical gestures as I do it. But then you also have some of these very awkward hand crossings later on with some of the arabesque figures, which I've taken it that you wouldn't want me to rearrange the hands in this.
Just exemplify this first note with
Sorry, exemplify, sure.
Well, thank you.
So, you might write with that sort of big wrist motion, which, as you know, is a type of motion I would do in some sense anyhow, but this is like a hypertrophied version of what I do. The whole technique I use generally involves connecting notes with the wrist so that the upward motion of the wrist causes the dampers to come down more slowly and you get a more rounded ending, if I want that. If I want to do something in a more dry way, I'll use less wrist action. So to some extent, I would do that anyhow, but this is in a more, yes, I'll say a more exaggerated form, but then that contrasts with just doing a short motion. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking of.
Do you want to exemplify this?
The hand crossing.
Hand crossing,
I'll give you an example of that. Yes.
Or some parts you just want to show this body exaggerating movement.
These different rhythms between the hands and these quite complex arabesque figures in the left hand, right up near the top of the piano, and then gradually it starts chasing each other.
Okay, yeah. Well,
sorry, gradually the hands start chasing each other up the piano.
About piano playing is not just to play the notes like this. Well, we need to use our body and everything, you know. I think I'm not sure. Maybe we'll ask the audience about this later.
Well, if I can say something there, I've never believed that recording and live performance are particularly similar. And I do record some live concerts, but not as a matter of course. One of the reasons is this sort of detail in a live performance, I can connect two notes with a hand gesture which fills in the experiential gap. On a recording where you can't hear me, that's just nothingness between the two attacks, and I think that's what you see. I mean, it's not necessarily in terms of just when this is foregrounded, like in this piece, but in a lot of music, the whole experience of perception, I find, is so different when you're actually watching the physical actions involved. And many things want to be modified if you know this is going to be listened to without that, i.e. for a recording. That's why I'd always sooner play live performances and then do a studio recording. The priorities are so very different. It's also like the difference between theatre and film, I think. If I'm wanting to sort of play to those of you sitting at the back here, it's a very different thing to if I wanted to play to a microphone, which is there. Different mode of projection, different type of rhetoric, and so on. And yeah, I do think in most live performance, something of that physicality plays a part in the very rhetoric of playing, physical rhetoric, if you like.
Okay. Well, I think we will listen, and then maybe we'll go to some questions or talk. Or okay, João.
one question to start off with. So you spoke about your sort of the work process for the set of pieces that goes by both a communication between the composer, the video artist, and the piano performer. But at the same time that there's a distance because you work from very afar with each other, and then the piece comes together from that afarness to a sort of putting it together. That in relation to that bodily sense that the piece very clearly has, how do you relate that distance in the process of the working together afar with that necessity to build something that is so physical?
Well, maybe I could say that. I mean, while it's a very close collaboration that we've been working together for almost 15 years now, it's not perhaps primarily verbal in that sense. I know Patricia's work very well now, I think, and certainly in the earlier stages with the earlier pieces, I think there was more of a sense of getting a feel for the idiom, for the demands. But now I think often there's not a lot said in rehearsal, and I think it's become much clearer just through the scores that she sends, the sort of type of desired result I think that's being sought, both in a bodily and a sort of sonic sense. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think we are not distant. That's my answer. I think people can be apart, but they are always in touch. That's the first thing, even if not every day. But I think we know each other already very well, and also the capabilities of each of us. But also it's a kind of mental same way of going in this world. That's the important thing. We can be really far, but if we have the same kind of thoughts and ways of being, I think it's a big part on this work, I think.
And when we communicate remotely about other things, whether it's any of the vast number of sort of poets or artists that you are interested in, or if I'm suggesting to you the work of Tadeusz Kantor or Chris Marker, for example, which I always think relates to what you do, or if we're even talking about some popular music or anything else like that, I think probably we sort of understand more about each other through those means than necessarily this is what you want to do in bar 65 of this piece.
Maybe. Yeah, I think that's all about this. Sometimes we can't explain.
Yes. But I think I understand a lot about your music from looking at your photographs as well.
Yeah, there's also a link between all things we do, actually. Also in his writings, and he's also he starts to compose now. So
return to composing.
Return. Well,
I've composed since I was very young, but I had a long break from doing it.
I didn't know,
yes.
so.
Yes.
But I think, yeah, that's the thing. But this happens not only with Ian, but with other people. I think that's a normal thing. For me, it's normal. I don't need to talk every day with everyone.
Could I mention another collaboration, which is when we mentioned before the composer Michael Finnessy, who I've worked very closely with for a quarter century and played his complete piano works, including a 5.5-hour piano work called The History of Photography and Sound, which I played again in 2016 for his 70th birthday, and Patricia created an installation to accompany that, a mixture of text and photographs, also produced in a gorgeously produced box, as it were. relating in part to some of the texts by Roland Barthes on which Finnessy himself draws in the cycle, and also reading my analyses of the work as well. And wondered if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, I almost forgot. Not forgot, but it's really important. Also, Ian played a lot of Finnessy music, and he knows him very well. And at a certain point, we did. Ian proposed me to create from Finnessy's music a kind of photography work, and I think what he told me when I showed him that was it was that. So this kind of relations we can't explain. We do things, and the result is this mixture of beings.
Yes. Does anyone else have some questions?
How much is the movement of the hands directly? How much is the movement of the hands directly linked to the musical material, or how much do you add afterwards? Like, for example, this thing.
Well, I think they come together, actually. This movement is to try to search for something, and we start with a big movement, and then we start to be near and near the piano. So it's a kind of research of the pianist for something, in my view, actually. So these things come together, not after nor before. So sometimes it happens that they come after, but not in this case. But I think Ian can explain more. The sound result is really different. If you play, as I said, like this or with your body, but I think he can explain better than me. Well, it's a kind of physical reaction to the material, but also sometimes it is written how to do it, sometimes not. But if I didn't write this, Ian will not do it. So, you see, it's true.
It would be too much of an imposition, an external imposition, to add such a thing, certainly in that type of fashion. I'm hesitant to get into this because it's quite a complicated subject. Actually, something I'm giving a keynote paper about on Thursday in Aveiro at a conference there. About my keynote there is called A Short History of Key Noise. And I was always interested in the question of how, on the piano, well, whether it is possible to produce a variation in timbre independently of a change of dynamics. And the mechanism of the piano is reasonably straightforward. The finger presses a key. Just to give a single note here, the finger presses a key, the key moves upwards and throws a hammer up towards the string. When the hammer hits the string, it's no longer in contact with the key or the finger. The only possible parameter that one could change or modify is the speed at which it hits the string. And any change in speed will produce a change in dynamic. So, for a single note, I say, obviously when you've got blendings between notes and you've got voicings and chords, that changes many things, and pedaling as well, of course, but still sticking with a single note. And this has been the subject of various research, at least since the early 20th century, when various German pedagogues started to look into this. And they came to a conclusion, which I'd also arrived at from a different source, that when you hear the sound of a piano note, you hear not only the sound of the hammer hitting the string, but also the sound of the finger hitting the key. And we're not necessarily used to sort of isolating that second thing, because it's very rare to hear it on its own. But that is, in my view, a very key part of how one perceives timbre. And I mean, it's only extremely subtle in this piece, and where I am playing the things with two different motions, it's also at two different dynamics, so that changes things. But playing a sort of throwing motion like that with the finger, as compared to doing something where I'm easing it down with the wrist, will very slightly change what I call the key noise, that sound of the finger on the key. And I think that's one of the reasons why one does hear a difference. And often when I'm demonstrating in masterclass and things, I show people how you could play something like the beginning of the Tchaikovsky B-flat minor concerto with either letting the hands fall under gravity or actually pressing very closely from the surface of the keys, so you get a big sound but with less attack on it, and that sort of thing. And there's been a whole number of composers have written pieces to me where actually they work this parameter into the musical fabric. And there are earlier pieces that were written for other people when I was younger than I was playing this, like by Silvano Bussotti or Niklas Harhuber, which I think also demonstrate this facet. And it just very much interests me. And it's something, I think there's a lot of mystical nonsense talked about how somehow if you breathe into the piano, you'll make it sing or make it pray or all that sort of stuff. I don't really have much time for that. I'm interested in how precisely you get sound, not just because some people think they see the deity on the ceiling, that somehow that's going to produce a divinely inspired sound. It doesn't.
Well, we are talking about the sound, but there is also a visual thing. And it can be related to what you want to express.
What he wants to express.
I'm thinking about me, I'm egoist. But, sometimes I write what I want to see visually. Other times I don't need. So that's how it works.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
I have a question about somehow your work puts together music.
Olá, Rosa.
Olá. Music and image. And I don't know if exactly how do both function. I understand that you work with a third person, with a third artist, but somehow I see a lot less complexity in the visual work than in the musical work. And my question is if there's if it's wanted, or if how do you interact both things exactly in your way of conceiving the work?
That's precisely that. As he said, I need to search the page, but as he said, that's the one. No, before. Resultado intermédio, orgânico e cru, em termos de imagem. Eu acho que, I think, it's interesting that you say you can see complexity in those images. For me, it's new, but I related immediately to Daniel's words. At the same time, I think I don't need. I can't answer.
Well, could I put from that in the works that have got dancers in as well? Because you hand the choreography over to those. I mean, would you ever want to try actually composing some of the choreography yourself into these?
Well, actually, the image ideas are not coming only from him, are coming from me and him, and he is more a kind of technician, but then we work the aesthetical part together. And all those ideas are coming from the music ideas. They are part of discourse completely. Even if they don't seem, and actually there is something I want to say, is we need to listen not only one time, but thousands of times. So, and see. So the first time maybe we can't even find anything, but we need to listen twice or even more. And that's one thing that I need to not show, but to send to people with this work. That's all. It's an open work. This is my answer. I had it.
Hello, congratulations.
Hello.
I'm more and more convinced that music is to be played. Of course, in the end, there is a sound, but most of us went to study music and become musicians to play an instrument. So it's a bit about that physicality. Of course, for that physicality, I understand that in the end there is a sound, and that it's different to do in different ways. My question is, if your image, being the dancing or the films, that and to both in a way, if that connects with that physical idea of music, of making music, if that connects or not, how that connects, it's something I was curious about.
I remember that we had a kind of talk, I don't know how many years ago, about this. And at that time, I remember your answer, and you told me, with some experience I did with I wanted to do some visual.
Probably something very rude.
Yes. So, but it was, I remember always that, so it was important. And when I work on these things, I always remember your answer, because the work was not really well done from my part. And I was thinking about that, why? And in one way, it was related to that question. Because sometimes the music relates to the film, and other times doesn't. And I don't need to do that, actually. I don't need to have that coherence always, and to show immediately what I want with that. So there are a few ways that I give to go somewhere. I don't need to show everything.
I would wonder if in the piece I played, or in any of the pieces that you heard the recordings of, how much you're struck by the use of contour in the music, because I find the contours extremely striking. The shapes of the material, and if it's anything that's more defining than the harmonic properties to me, and also the sort of fragmented nature of some of the shapes in the state of evolution. And I'm just quite curious to know, or it's a bit of a big question, how much that is what any of you as listeners and watchers as well, if that's a major thing that comes across, especially in the piece Reditus ad vitam, I think, which perhaps is my favourite of the five. Do I like them all?
Well, actually, my question was also a bit to come to a certain relation between the oral contour and that physicality. That it's for me at least, it's very clearly related a certain oral contour that is thought as sound, but not only as sound. And as you said, you wrote the piece not for Ian's fingers, but for the whole Ian, the whole of Ian. That's why I put that question, because I find it actually maybe even more incredible, because being a part, having a close awareness to that physicality without proximity. My question was a bit in that sense, because there is clearly a very physical state that it's not just a performative state. It's a state where you know how the performer will act in a very intimate physical way and respond to a certain type of material that is pressed and oral at the same time. And for me, maybe I'm pulling your suggestion in more towards my initial question, because but for me there's a very clear relation from the composer's part, maybe, I don't know, in creating something that has all these elements put together, the oral contour, the moving body, the contour of the moving body, and specifically Ian's moving body. So for me, maybe a back question is but in the process of creation, in the process of thinking the materials, how do you articulate this relation of the oral contour and having in mind that it's going to be produced by a specific person?
Well, I think, and you know that in all history, people wrote for certain people because maybe they know their technique, their way of being, their way of playing, and it's a kind of, they know your discourse.
But
that's the main thing.
It's in the sense of how do the materials, when you are writing, how do you relate them? I mean, the oral object that you want to reach, and how is the relation, because they are two parts of the same piece, the body that it's going to perform, and the oral result. How do they act together in your process of composing?
Well, it's like to go to a shop and buy a dress for your size.
Well, my point is a bit of a different one, but it's slightly going me back to the point I was asking. It's something I thinking about and was thinking more about there was thinking of some of the paintings of Max Ernst, and these images which some conceive as a sort of horribly distorted rendition of things that exist in nature, and particularly in his painting Europe After the Rain, the famed one, the idea of somehow capturing in these surrealist tones something of the devastation of a particular situation. But I don't actually see them as being such a sort of bleak vision. I see this in terms of transforming and creating anew, and something very fundamentally positive of that. And I was thinking all about the shapes you create. They've obviously got some roots in gestures which have a prehistory before them, but they're always sort of bent and pulled around in all sorts of new ways. There's the name of a book by a musicologist called Julian Johnson called Webern and the Transformation of Nature. And I like this. It's like a Baudelaire idea that we can improve on nature. But if we take tradition and the prehistory of all the language we take, that we work with, then we can go beyond that. We don't just have to replicate that. And that's what I find so vivid in this music. Ernst is good, and Breton, of course, as well.
That's why I can't answer.
Yes.
I think I have the ideas, but then you think about the performer, but then because of this relation, mind relation, maybe and thoughts, this happens. Sometimes you can say it's like this and that. Why? I think all this world that you have with people in common links people together. And it's not only music notes, you know, it's a background, a big background, not only music, but painting and photography and literature, philosophy, etc. And we talked sometimes about it, and also I need to mention not only these kind of artistic problems, but the planet problems, world problems, which are very important also to join these things together, I think. That's what I can say.
In one side of your photographic work, the ones I'm always really struck by, often involving mannequins, often involving shop windows, and these deeply sort of very finely chiseled Baroque imagery around this, but there seems such a sort of preoccupation with death and such a sort of strong aura, a sense of, that comes through in all these. Where what I don't particularly find there, and this is not in any sense a criticism, is sort of very sensuous qualities I find in the music. And that's why I was always interested, as you remember, showing you this, I mean, I don't think you knew before, the theatrical work by Tadeusz Kantor's, a so-called Dead Class, about a class, I don't know if any of you know it, it was filmed by sort of Vida, involves literally a class of people being taught by someone, but half of them are actual people and the other half are mannequins, so they're very literally dead, and at some points they start dancing with each other to this Polish waltz. It's very, very strange, but very brilliant work, and I was always fascinated. At the moment I saw that, I thought, what will Patricia make of that? But I don't find that element of that the mannequins do seem to represent death to me, and I don't particularly find that, except perhaps in your culture.
Actually, I was talking about this yesterday with Jakub, who is there too. Actually, and with Pedro Boleo. Actually, mannequins are, for me, are not something. I don't know the word repugnant. Repugnant, but they have some life we need to search, actually.
Okay.
And that's what I, at the first sight, maybe not, when you look at the pictures, but or the photographs, but you need to search again for things. I don't want to give all food made, but we need to search things, and I'm searching too, each day. So I'm not done yet.
That might be a good point to end with, I think.
I didn't notice, but yeah.
Yes.
A próxima sessão vai ser com o compositor António Sousa Dias. Vai ser uma sessão especial, vai ser uma espécie de novo segmento de cada ciclo do Projecto MUSIVUS, em que vamos convidar um compositor para falar sobre alguém importante na história da composição portuguesa no século XX. A próxima sessão será será um MUSIVUS in memoriam, com o compositor António Sousa Dias a falar sobre a compositora Constança Capo de Filo. Será no dia... Sim, iremos ter mais 2 convidados presentes, ambos que partilharam e experienciaram. Aliás, o Pedro até seria a pessoa ideal para falar sobre isso, porque foi aluno da Constança, mas que irão estar a falar sobre a sua experiência com a compositora. A sessão será no dia 12 de novembro, à mesma hora, no mesmo sítio, portanto são todos bem-vindos. Muito obrigado a ambos pela vossa participação. E por tudo.
Alô, tá. Também queria agradecer Pedro e João e o Nuno, que está contactei menos, mas também a todos os que estiveram aqui e que já não via há tempo. Gostei muito de vos ver aqui. Obrigada.